The price of freedom, the hidden consequences of leaving a narcissist. Abandonment. It's a word most people associate with loneliness, heartbreak, or childhood wounds. Yet in the world of narcissism, it carries a darker and more explosive meaning. Welcome back to the channel where we explore the labyrinth of narcissistic minds and the relationships that orbit around them. Today, we'll unravel one of the most misunderstood yet crucial aspects of narcissistic behavior: abandonment. At first glance, it often appears that the narcissist holds all the power. The relationship cycle they orchestrate, idealization, devaluation, discard, and hoovering, makes them seem like master puppeteers, controlling every emotional string. Psychologists describe this as narcissistic sequencing, a pattern fueled by the narcissist's fragile ego and dependency on external validation. In the beginning, they idealize you, showering you with affection, attention, and what appears to be deep empathy. But as soon as they believe they've secured you, their mask begins to slip. What once felt like love morphs into contempt, boredom, or outright disdain. Dr. Ramani Durvasula, a leading expert on narcissism, explains that for the narcissist, the chase is the high. It's the intoxicating pursuit of validation, not the maintenance of intimacy, that thrills them. Once they've won you, the emotional thrill evaporates, replaced by irritation, superiority, and emotional withdrawal. Their inability to sustain genuine connection is rooted in their underdeveloped capacity for empathy and their profound fear of vulnerability. The narcissist doesn't just devalue you. They devalue the very intimacy they once pretended to crave. But what happens when the roles reverse? When you are the one who walks away? Contrary to the illusion of control they project, narcissists are rarely prepared for abandonment. In fact, psychologists emphasize that few experiences are more destabilizing for a narcissist than losing the person who once supplied their ego. The moment you leave, the narcissist faces a profound psychological injury, one that threatens their fragile sense of superiority. Suddenly, they are stripped of control, validation, and the illusion of dominance that once defined the relationship. The aftermath can unfold in many ways: rage, mockery, feigned indifference, or cold revenge. A narcissist may sneer, "You'll never make it without me," or act as though you were never important. But beneath these defenses lies a deep panic, the same primal fear that once haunted them as children. Clinical psychologists note that this reaction stems from abandonment trauma deeply embedded in early attachment wounds. Narcissists often experienced conditional love, affection tied to performance, achievement, or appearance, leading to an internalized belief that they must always maintain control to avoid rejection. Here's the paradox. The narcissist, who seems invincible in their cruelty, is actually deeply vulnerable to the pain of abandonment. It's not the loss of you as a person that devastates them. It's the loss of power, of emotional supply, of someone to reflect their self-importance. Psychologists link this to attachment dysregulation, an inability to manage the anxiety triggered by separation or independence. For many narcissists, even brief distance can ignite irrational anger or paranoia. Something as simple as you leaving for a trip or spending time away can make them spiral into accusations, hostility, or sudden emotional withdrawal. Imagine this. The day before your departure for a short business trip, tension starts to rise. Small arguments erupt over trivial things: the way you pack, the tone of your voice, or even how long you'll be gone. You might find yourself wondering why your attempt to leave peacefully is turning into chaos. But from a psychological standpoint, this isn't random. What you're witnessing is separation anxiety wrapped in arrogance. The narcissist's unconscious fear of losing control manifests as irritation, blame, or even sabotage. Psychologists often describe this as preemptive defense. The narcissist attacks you emotionally before you can abandon them. They would rather destroy the connection on their own terms than risk the humiliation of being left behind. In their mind, anger is safer than vulnerability. Every cruel word, every needless argument, is their way of protecting their fragile ego from the unbearable reality that you are capable of leaving and surviving without them. For the victim, this experience can be profoundly confusing and painful. You might question your sanity, wondering how love could so quickly transform into hostility. But therapists emphasize that understanding the psychological mechanism behind these reactions is essential to healing. Recognizing that their aggression is not your fault but rather a defense against their own internal chaos can be deeply liberating. To protect yourself, mental health experts recommend several key strategies. Maintain emotional boundaries, refuse to engage in circular arguments, and most importantly, stay calm and consistent. Your composure is your shield. When you disengage from their emotional bait, their anger, mockery, or tears, you deny them the energy they crave. Silence and neutrality become acts of power. Ultimately, leaving a narcissist is not just about physical separation. It's a psychological act of liberation. It signals to them and to yourself that their control no longer defines your worth. Psychologists call this the moment of narcissistic collapse, when the narcissist's illusion of superiority crumbles under the weight of reality. And for you, that moment marks the beginning of recovery, the rediscovery of your voice, your peace, and your freedom. When the narcissist returns, or when you do, the reunion rarely unfolds like a scene from a romantic film. There's no warmth, no embrace that speaks of longing or relief. Instead, what greets you is emotional distance, an eerie detachment that feels almost surgical. Their eyes may glance over you but never quite see you. You might sense an invisible wall, a stiffness in their tone, a subtle coolness that leaves you questioning if you've done something wrong. Psychologists describe this moment as emotional dissonance after separation, a manifestation of the narcissist's fractured attachment system. For individuals with narcissistic personality traits, the act of reunion is not soothing. It is triggering. According to attachment theory, these individuals often oscillate between anxious and avoidant attachment patterns, constantly torn between craving closeness and fearing it. The very return of their partner, the very presence of intimacy, reactivates the same fear they sought to escape. What should feel safe becomes threatening. Psychologically, it's as if the narcissist relives the ancient wound of dependence they once vowed never to experience again. And so, instead of tenderness, they lash out. Instead of gratitude, they project contempt. Their anger, "I can't believe you left me in the first place," is not logical rage but primitive protest. Clinical psychologists often compare it to the wail of an abandoned infant. Raw, wordless, and desperate. Yet because the narcissist's adult self cannot bear the shame of such vulnerability, they transform that panic into hostility. Their fury is their armor, their sarcasm, their shield. Curiously, this reaction emerges even when the narcissist is the one who leaves. Whether they're boarding a plane or simply walking out the door, the act of separation destabilizes them internally. Psychologists emphasize that for narcissistic individuals, abandonment is not defined by who leaves, it's defined by who loses control. The very idea of emotional independence, of not being the center of your world for even a few hours, feels intolerable. To them, your absence signifies not love interrupted, but power diminished. This is where the psychology becomes even more fascinating and tragic. Abandonment at its core is not an adult emotion. It is, as experts like Dr. Otto Kernberg describe, a regression to infantile terror. When a caregiver disappears from a baby's sight, the child cannot yet comprehend object permanence, the understanding that what is gone can still exist. To the infant, the absence means annihilation. In adulthood, this same primitive wiring can reawaken within narcissists. They are not consciously aware of it. They only feel an unexplainable surge of fear and rage. In their world, your departure, even brief, feels like a part of them has vanished. Of course, to the outside world, they conceal this fragility with theatrical bravado. Narcissists are masters of the performance, never admitting fear, never appearing weak. Yet psychologists studying narcissistic defenses note that behind this grandiosity lies rejection sensitivity, a hyperreactive emotional system that interprets even the mildest boundary as an existential threat. You say, "I can't meet for lunch today," and they hear, "You don't love me anymore. You need time alone," and they perceive betrayal. Their ego cannot differentiate between emotional space and emotional rejection, so they retaliate, often through coldness or cruelty. But perhaps the cruelest irony is that when you try to soothe them, to calm their storm with affection or reassurance, they recoil. In psychological terms, this is called shame activation. Your kindness exposes their vulnerability, reminding them of the weakness they deny. To feel comforted is, for them, to feel small. Thus, they turn against the very empathy that could heal them. You reach out and they slap your hand away, metaphorically or even literally. What they truly fear is not abandonment itself, but the mirror of intimacy that reflects how deeply they need someone. It's no surprise, then, that psychologists often describe the narcissistic fear of abandonment as a quieter cousin of borderline personality dynamics. Both stem from early attachment disruptions, environments where love was conditional, where approval was earned, not given. The difference lies in expression. While those with borderline tendencies externalize their despair through emotional volatility, narcissists bury theirs beneath arrogance and anger. Yet at the root, both are terrified of being left unseen and unloved. This unresolved fear also explains one of the most confounding behaviors victims of narcissistic abuse face. Hoovering, the act of pulling you back after you've escaped. If they fear abandonment, people often ask, why do narcissists leave in the first place? Psychologists call this preemptive abandonment. In essence, they abandon you before you can abandon them. It's a psychological maneuver designed to maintain control. By leaving first, they rewrite the story. They are not rejected. They are the rejecter. But once you begin to heal, once you stop chasing, the equilibrium breaks. Their ego trembles under the realization that you can live, even thrive, without them. That's when they return, not out of love, but out of desperation to restore the power dynamic that defines their sense of identity. For survivors, understanding this cycle is critical. Each stage, the rage, the withdrawal, the hoovering, is not about you. It's about the narcissist's battle with their own fragmented self. Clinical experts advise victims to focus not on decoding the narcissist's emotions, but on reinforcing their own psychological boundaries. This means resisting the pull to explain, defend, or comfort. Instead, stay anchored in what psychologists call emotional neutrality. Respond with calm, factual statements. Let silence carry the weight your words no longer need to bear. And above all, remember, their reaction to your independence is not proof of your cruelty. It's evidence of their fragility. When you stop feeding their need for control, you confront them with the truth they cannot bear. That love cannot be coerced, and power cannot replace connection. That realization, more than any punishment, is what makes the narcissist unravel. The narcissist's need to abandon first is not about independence, it's about control. Psychologists often describe this behavior as preemptive defense, a psychological mechanism designed to dull the sting of rejection before it happens. By initiating the separation themselves, narcissists create an illusion of power, a way to script the pain before the pain scripts them. It's the same logic as watching a horror movie while knowing every jump scare in advance. The anticipation feels safer than the shock. Yet beneath this illusion of mastery lies a terrified psyche, a person running from the ghost of their own dependency. When they attempt to leave before being left, it sets off a primitive emotional loop. The narcissist's psyche becomes a revolving door of push and pull, an endless cycle of go away, no come back. This emotional whiplash is not strategy in the conscious sense. It's instinctive, disorganized attachment manifesting in adulthood. Psychologists studying this dynamic often refer to it as the disorganized attachment paradox, where one simultaneously craves closeness and fears it. It's the child who clings desperately to the mother they just kicked, terrified by the very distance they demanded. In romantic relationships, this dynamic becomes the blueprint for hoovering, the narcissist's desperate, manipulative attempt to reel you back in once they feel the loss of control. The comparison to childhood tantrums is not merely metaphorical, it's clinical. The narcissist's emotional maturity is often frozen at the developmental stage where love equated to possession and attention was mistaken for existence. Psychologically, they never internalized the capacity for object constancy, the ability to trust that someone still cares for you even when they're not physically present. So when you walk away, even momentarily, they experience it as annihilation. Their frantic need to get you back isn't rooted in love. It's rooted in survival. You are no longer a partner in their eyes. You are oxygen. What makes this cycle so destructive is that every return resets the trauma. Victims of narcissistic abuse often describe this phase as both intoxicating and devastating. The hoovering is seductive, filled with promises of change, sudden displays of vulnerability, and declarations of, "I can't live without you." Yet psychologists warn that this phase is the most dangerous. It's the emotional equivalent of being lured back into a burning house because the flames momentarily look like candlelight. Each reconciliation reinforces the narcissist's belief that control equals love, and the victim's nervous system learns to equate chaos with attachment. Underneath it all lies the narcissist's ultimate terror: abandonment shame. Shame, according to trauma specialists, is not just an emotion. It's an internal collapse. For narcissists, being left doesn't merely hurt. It exposes the unbearable belief that they are unworthy of love unless they control it. This is why rejection, even imagined rejection, can ignite volcanic rage. Their self-image is so fragile that any hint of being unwanted triggers what psychologists call a narcissistic injury, a psychic wound that must be avenged to restore the illusion of superiority. That's why mockery, belittlement, and sudden cruelty often follow an act of perceived abandonment. The narcissist cannot bear to feel small, so they make you feel smaller. This explains why, paradoxically, narcissists weaponize the threat of leaving. In marriages and long-term relationships, the phrase "I'm done" becomes their favorite instrument of control. Repeated threats of divorce, breakups, or walking away serve as a form of psychological conditioning, a cruel reminder that your stability depends on their whims. Clinical psychologists describe this as abandonment gaslighting, conditioning the victim to live in perpetual fear of loss, so they comply, apologize, and cling. Over time, the victim's nervous system becomes hypervigilant, trained to anticipate the narcissist's next storm, while the narcissist grows addicted to the power such fear affords. But then comes the turning point, the moment the victim finally says, "Fine, you want to leave? Go." That simple sentence often sends the narcissist spiraling. For perhaps the first time, the control slips from their grasp. Psychologists observe that when the narcissist's threats are met with calm acceptance, the psychological script collapses. Their bluff is exposed. Suddenly, the abandonment they once controlled becomes real, and their internal world implodes. It's not the loss of love they mourn, but the loss of power. That's when the abandonment wound, that deep, primitive fear they've spent their entire life suppressing, comes roaring back. This is why, after weeks or months of threatening divorce or separation, a narcissistic partner will often panic when you finally agree. The instant you stop playing your assigned role, their entire narrative crumbles. They may backtrack, saying, "I didn't mean it," or "We can work this out." Psychologically, this is a defense known as narcissistic backpedaling, an emergency attempt to reestablish control over the relationship's emotional flow. What feels like reconciliation to the victim is actually damage control for the narcissist's fractured ego. For survivors, recognizing this cycle is crucial. The antidote to the narcissist's abandonment fear is not appeasement, it's detachment. Psychologists emphasize that healing begins when the victim stops interpreting the narcissist's behavior as personal. Their rage is not proof of your worthlessness. It's evidence of their wound. Their sudden tenderness after cruelty is not love. It's manipulation born of fear. The most effective strategy, as trauma experts recommend, is emotional neutrality. No pleading, no defending, no explaining. Calm indifference dismantles the narcissist's control mechanism because it denies them both their favorite weapons, your fear and your reaction. Ultimately, the path to freedom lies in cultivating what the narcissist cannot: inner security. While therapy helps the victim rebuild boundaries and self-trust, it also exposes a truth that's both tragic and liberating, that the narcissist's life will always be governed by threat perception. As Dr. Ramani Durvasula and other experts note, narcissists live in a constant state of siege, forever bracing for attacks that exist only in their minds. Their entire emotional world revolves around a single haunting theme: "I will be abandoned again." That fear controls them even as they try to control everyone else. So when you finally walk away, calmly, quietly, and for good, understand this: your silence is not cruelty. is closure. It's the one act that forces the narcissist to face what they've avoided all their life, the echo of their own emptiness. And in that silence, for the first time, you become free.